So I think most of us, when we hear the word church, we immediately think of a building. I know I do, whether it's Meadow Park, whether it's Sloan's Lake, but I often think about Emmanuel Baptist. Emmanuel Baptist was this big church that I grew up going to when I was a kid, and Emmanuel had this huge sanctuary, and way down in front, like up about 20 feet on the wall, was the baptismal tank, and everyone could see it in the room. And I remember on Sunday nights, after the church service was done, my buddy Dean figured out that if we could elude Lou Weiss and get back in to the sanctuary, that if you stood on top of the choir pews, you could get onto this little ledge. And from this little ledge, then you could get into the baptismal tank. And from the baptismal tank, you were into the upper level of the church building. And it was amazing. Oh my gosh. There were rooms up there, and there was the balcony up there. And Lou Weiss had no idea we were up there. Oh man, it was great. And you know, the church building is an amazing thing. As I think about Meadow Park and I think about where we're located and the blessing of this building, I think of the support groups that are able to use this. I think about the classes that meet here. I think about weddings. I think about funerals. I think about, you know, Sunday worship. This building is an important part of church, but it's not church. I mean, I realized years ago that the church is the people in it, that we are the church. So tonight we're going to be talking about the church, because I believe that the foundation is that the church is bigger than the building, a lot bigger than the building. Great ministry happens here. I wouldn't want to do it without it, but ministry can be done without a building. Okay, we're doing it right now. But I think about the early church as I look at the church in Acts 2, and I think about what they were about. They were about the apostles' teaching. They were about there being biblical teaching that took place. They were about fellowship. And by fellowship, you know, we get together sometimes at church and we say hi and how's things going, and we talk about maybe the latest TikTok we saw, or we talk about, you know, how the Browns doing. Well, we always know how the Browns are doing. But fellowship is really getting into life. And I think about Dteams, and I think about that's what they're designed to be, a place where we're able to come, we're able to have fun together and talk about things that are funny and fun, but we're also able to get real with life. And that's what we talk about when we talk about fellowship. We talk about breaking of bread, and that was both just eating together. I think it's important that we just have a meal together. There's a lot of things that can happen around a table. I think it's also breaking bread in the sense of, you know, communion, the Lord's Supper, because that is a huge piece for the church. When we remember Christ's body that was broken for us, his blood that was shed for us, that's the church coming together. And also for prayer. These were the things that the early church was doing. And we also think about that the early church, though, they were all about going out. When I think about specific people, like the church being people, there's a few people that come to my mind. I think about, you know, if I think about Meadow Park, I think of Bert Williams. I think of Bert is always out there to greet us and welcome us. He does an amazing job with that. I think about Larry and Pam, always in the cafe, and just, you know, the way they love us through that. I think about Ralph Bull, a guy at my church I grew up at, that he was the first one that really wanted me to be an usher, and I thought that was really cool that they would actually trust me to, you know, do anything other than just sit and behave, and which didn't happen often. Anyway, but the other was a guy named Al Agnew, and Al Agnew was at the church in Denver, and Al is not your typical church guy. Al was a guy that he was there every Sunday. He faithfully gave. He faithfully was a part of the church, but he was more about life outside of that building. You know, Al, quite honestly, I never was ever sure on a given week whether Al liked me or not. Some weeks I thought I was irritating to him. Some weeks I wondered, you know, am I just, you know, part of the church that he just gets frustrated with? But the thing is I loved about Al was out with people. Al was a farrier, which meant he shoed horses, and so he was a tough guy. And he just was always sharing Christ with people around him. And he was always pointing to them to go, you know, to get involved in church services and things that were happening in the building, but he was being the church outside of the building. You know, as we think about what the word church even means, in the Greek, it's ekklesia, and ekklesia is basically what it's saying is that is a called out assembly, a church that's called out of the building. And as I think about, you know, I talked about Philip a few weeks ago, and I think about where we are as a church, that we are scattered about. Now we get to be the church. we're still able to encourage one another through Zoom, and it's cool we're able to, encourage one another through Facebook and all that. We're able to spend time in the Word like we're supposed to, encouraging one another to be reading our Bible and connecting with each other that way. But we're also able to be out in the world and be salt and light. We've been talking about the Sermon on the Mount, and the Sermon on the Mount talks about this, and it says in Matthew 5:13-16, "You are the salt of the earth, but what good is salt if it has lost its flavor? Can you make it salty again? It will be thrown out and trampled underfoot as worthless. You are the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and then posts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your Heavenly Father." Man, we get to be salt and light in the world. I think about salt, and I think about, adding flavor to life. I think that right now we have a real opportunity to show the world that there is a flavor that's missing if you don't have a relationship with Christ. That your life may seem like everything is great, but man, I'm telling you, there is this thing that is missing that just adds to every part of your life. There is something that Christ brings. And I hope we're living our lives in that way as we go through this time. Man, I tell you, light, that's a given. I think about the darkness that this virus has brought to the world, the darkness of death, the darkness of just losing family members, the darkness of just the impact that we don't know financially. And there's just so many things that there's this darkness that seems to be there. And yet there's this Christ, this God that's a light, who wants to be light in this world, who wants to say, there's still hope. I still love you. I have not left you. I still walk with you. And we get to be that light. Yes, there's many ways that God shines without ever us being a part of it, but there's so many ways He chooses to use us to be that light. So I want to encourage us in Dteams tonight we're going to look at the early church, we're going to talk about it, but we're also going to be talking about this thing of being salt and light. What are ways that Christ and God is calling us to be salt and light in this world, in this time? How can we make a difference? I think God's calling us to do more, because the church is definitely bigger than the building.